A couple of months ago, BYD here in Australia offered me a test drive of the new Atto 3 world electric crossover vehicle. And excitedly, I said yes. I'd fly up to Sydney from here in Melbourne whenever the car was ready. Well, that hasn't happened. Only one media rep in Australia has actually tested the car. And I think actually only one journalist anywhere in the world outside of China has tested the car. And here is exactly what they had to say about whether it was good or whether it was bad. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm the Electric Viking. Great to have you here. Welcome to all the new subscribers. Welcome back, everyone else. We have done more than well over 1,000 videos over the past, 8 or 9 months. Make sure you check some of those out and make sure you click on that little icon as well to get updated in your feed when we have new videos out. And if you've seen my arm here, my leg, etc., and you're wondering what it's all about, well, I'll put a link in the description below to my bike crash where I basically nearly destroyed myself. And luckily, I was wearing a full face helmet. Moving on, BYD's electric vehicle. As many of you know, I have pre-ordered one of these, and BYD do plan on selling them in many different countries around the world. So this is an electric car that you may be able to buy relatively soon. And that's the exciting thing about this. That's why I thought you guys might want to know about if it's actually any good. Now, there's been a bit of controversy about this review, which was posted on drive.com.au. And the controversy is it was kind of an illegal test drive. Now, technically, the vehicle tested here in Australia was left-hand drive. We only drive right-hand drive vehicles here in Australia. It had trade plates on it. Technically, journalists are not allowed to drive them with trade plates. But I mean, whatever. I don't personally care. But a lot of people in the comment section seem to find this very offensive and it hurt their feelings. And this shouldn't have happened. It's illegal. But anyway, here's what Sam Purcell from drive.com.au had to say about his experience testing the car. This is what he loved. This is what he hated. What he loved: impressive rotating central infotainment display. I've talked about that in the past. It's got a touchscreen in the middle. It's about 12.5 inches, and you can turn it to either being horizontal or vertical. He loved the unique interior treatment that stands apart from other EVs. A lot of people in the comment section hate the interior and say they won't buy it because the interior offends their sensibilities or they think it's shocking. Even actually my cousin here in Australia wanted to buy one and he's like, nah, I'm not buying it. I don't like the interior. Fair enough, each to their own. I don't really care that much about the interior. I care more about fundamental features that matter, like the battery pack and the price and, the range. Those kinds of things mattered more to me. But anyway, the other thing he loved was this spacious second row in the car. So the rear seats in the car, there's a lot of space there. Things he didn't like: the driving experience has some small issues. The tires didn't help the driving experience. And the fact that it doesn't currently have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. We'll apparently have to wait for those features to come. They should be here apparently by the end of the year. So this new BYD electric car is the first BYD electric car to be sold as a series production model in Australia. There's been some limited editions sold here, but not very many. This is actually the official first production run vehicle, which will be sold not in limited numbers. This car actually will be on sale, will be delivered here to customers in Australia in July. And it measures in at 4,455 millimeters long, 1,875 millimeters wide. So it's a size down from the Tesla Model Y, a bit smaller. Tesla Model Y is, nearly 400 millimeters longer. It's got room for 5 passengers. And it comes with a starting price of 44,800 Australian dollars. That's in the base specification. If you want to get the bigger battery, it's about 3,000 more Australian dollars. For context, that's around about 35,000 US dollars. If you're wondering, yes, there will be other electric BYD vehicles. Those include a pickup truck, which apparently is coming next year, a van, a sedan, and a large SUV. That's probably the car that I'm really after. So what I'm going to do is own one of these for a while, give you guys my feedback, my opinions on it, tell you whether or not it's good or whether it sucks. I'll tell you the truth. And then I'll sell it when the large SUV becomes available. And then I'll tell you what that's like. The model they tested actually is the model that has come straight from China. It's not the official production Australian version. It has left-hand drive, Chinese writing, Chinese badges, and logos. Those things will change for overseas markets once the official production model arrives. Plus, like I mentioned before, it's left-hand drive. Fine for you Americans and you Europeans, but for us here in Australia, we use right-hand drive. So the Tesla felt like that was a bit weird having to drive a car with the steering wheel on the side of the car that he's not used to. So there's two variants. There's the short range variant or standard range variant that comes with 320 kilometers of range. And then there's a long range battery variant, which has 420 kilometers of range. That's on the WLTP cycle. The extended range battery increases the battery size from the standard 50 kilowatt hours up to 60 kilowatt hour battery. But to me, it's a no-brainer to pay the extra 3,000 Australian dollars, about 2,300 US dollars to get the bigger battery pack. I think you'd have to be crazy to get the smaller pack, but that's just me. Based on the fact that MG, who sell electric cars here, they've got a similar electric car here. It's a bit smaller than this, costs about the same price. And at the time of them writing this review, the MG was cheaper. But now MG have raised their prices. The BYD is the cheapest electric car you can buy here in Australia, which makes it extremely good value. For context, for those of you who are wondering, the Tesla Model 3 here in Australia, it cost $60,000 at the time of this review. It's now increased its price to around about 62,000 Australian dollars. So what's that, about 45,000 US dollars. So in other words, this is quite a bit cheaper than a Tesla Model 3. Now, according to the reviewer, the interior is a different and impressive sight and design. While many recent newcomers have gone with a more derivative-based design that mimics and mirrors existing options, I have to applaud this interior for stepping in its own direction. It's probably not everyone's taste, but you're definitely not going to confuse the interior of an Atto 3 with anything else. Some of the more interesting points: the door handles mounted atop a speaker that surprisingly work well. There are red elastic cords that play a tune, as well as contain the door card contents. The air vents are an interesting design as well, which I can't remember seeing on another car. Thankfully, the Atto 3 retains a less zany approach to everyday storage. There is room underneath the center console and shifter for a small handbag. And you'll find twin USB points and a 12-volt power outlet down there as well. There is a wireless charging pad up top and a couple of cup holders behind the shifter. The central storage bin is well sized, covered with the same leather-like material you'll find on door cards and across the dashboard. I think that's a nice touch. The design is quite minimalist, with low-slung air vents, tidying up an otherwise empty dash, save for the massive screen in the middle. It's a curved and flowing design overall, in comparison to the angular and trapezoidal elements that seem quite popular in cars these days. An interesting point: the test car had the charging point for a karaoke microphone in the center console, something of a standard addition to the Chinese car market. Hopefully such a thing comes to Australia so I can try out Wanted Dead or Alive while crawling through bad Sydney, Australia traffic. This is an interesting point, isn't it? Volkswagen CEO recently pointed out the fact that Volkswagen is not doing that. It's kind of losing market share to Chinese car makers and Tesla in China because of this karaoke feature. They don't offer them. Basically, legacy automakers don't offer karaoke features in their cars. Chinese automakers do, Tesla does. And this is one of the things that Chinese and Asian buyers love. It's something that you just wouldn't think of, would you, here in the West? Karaoke in your car. But hey, each to their own. The other major material here is a foam-like plastic, something like an open-pore neoprene. It's designed to resemble a muscle, bulging with tendons and fibers, and certainly adds to the unique ambience inside the Atto 3. We noticed a small amount of dirt transfer on this part of the interior, but it cleaned easily with a damp cloth. In the second row, the size and design of the Atto 3 yields big benefits. Firstly, it is big. Considering this car is a little shorter than a Toyota RAV4, the amount of legroom and toe room is really impressive. Seats, covered in the same materials at the front, are comfortable, but headroom isn't in the same abundant supply. There was enough room for me, but taller adults would likely rub their head or hair against the top of the lid. Blame the sunroof, perhaps, which extends all the way back to behind the second row occupants. And now, based on the sunroof, that is a standard feature. These cars come with basically no options. They come very, very highly spec'd, very different to legacy auto. I know in America, you guys buy cars, sorry, but the specification they come standard with is straight garbage. And that's good. That's good because it means you can have a cheaper entry price. Well, that's one of the reasons why Europeans, Australians are like, why are the car prices so cheap in America? Well, one of the reasons is your standard base models come with nothing. They're like very, very, very basic. I think that's a good idea. Give people the option to get a cheaper car. And honestly, it's just something you have to keep in mind. This car comes very well spec'd for the price and in its standard base form. Now, because the Atto 3 is a ground-up EV design, the floor in the second row is completely flat. There's no transmission tunnel. Like some legacy auto manufacturers right now, right? They bring out these EVs. I'm not going to name names. You probably know who they are. Mercedes and BMW. Anyway, and there's a transmission tunnel. Guess what's inside it? Nothing. They don't have a transmission. I mean, that to me, you're paying good money for these cars, and you think that's kind of like what you would expect in an EV. It's not. It's not good enough. One of the reasons this matters is because when you try and fit 3 adults in the back of the car, put an adult in the middle, he's got nowhere for his feet to go because there's a transmission tunnel, right? Other elements in the BYD Atto 3 worth noting are air vents, twin USB points, matte pockets in the rear seats, and the same red elastic rope of the door card storage. The boot measures in at 434 litres. In its largest configuration, the floor in the boot sits down low above a goo kit. You can shift the floor upwards, almost level with the lip of the boot. In this spot, size is reduced dramatically, but you can then put in a proper spare wheel into the boot. So the volume of the boot increases from 434 litres to 1,330 litres if you put the rear seats down. Infotainment and connectivity. Here's where the party starts, apparently, or party tricks at least, to impress your friends. Firstly, the infotainment display is 12.8 inches. Pretty good for a standard specification in a car costing this price. Plus, it can rotate, like I said before, from portrait to horizontal orientation. Unfortunately, it currently doesn't have CarPlay or Android Auto connectivity for smartphone mirroring. Instead, it uses a D-Link third-party app for these things. BYD says it is looking to implement straight mirroring in the future and is hoping to have it sorted out by the end of the year. So basically they're saying, we're hoping to give you guys CarPlay and Android Auto by the end of the year. The operating system uses an interface similar to a smartphone with the ability to connect to the internet and download apps for general usage. Well, this is one of probably the biggest benefits of Chinese cars. They actually have very, very good open source platforms where you can basically download almost any apps that you want. There's digital radio listed as a feature for Australian vehicles, along with a 360-degree camera system, which is said to work really well. It has a variety of three-dimensional viewing positions to choose from, as well as keeping an eye on what's happening underneath the car. The system has a built-in DVR recorder or dash cam. So like Tesla's Sentry mode, not quite the same, but it works when you're driving, and you don't need to go and buy an additional hard drive like you do with the Tesla vehicle. So that's one advantage. Instead of a traditional instrument binnacle located on the dashboard, the BYD Atto 3 uses a smaller digital display mounted on the steering column. Apparently, it works well with basic readouts like driving range, energy usage, and speed readily available. Owners can cycle through some additional information as well, like tire pressure monitoring and average energy consumption. Now, so far, I think this car actually sounds really good. So what about safety and technology? A lot of you have been asking, is this car safe? Well, being a new model both in Australia and China and everywhere else in the world that's going to be released, we don't know everything about BYD's Atto 3 from a safety perspective. It hasn't been tested here in Australia yet, but it does have a lot of standard safety equipment. It comes with adaptive cruise control, 7 airbags, including a driver's far side or center airbag, front collision warning, rear collision warning, lane departure warning, rear cross traffic alert, and rear cross traffic braking, as well as autonomous emergency braking. So sounds pretty good on the safety front, in my opinion, considering all of that is standard. You don't have to pay extra for any of that. There's a couple of false alarms on the forward collision warning during the tester's drive with the car. And driving along narrow streets choked with parked vehicles, that's when it happened. But otherwise, its system worked quite well, they said. What about my view on value for money? Well, drive.com.au, which is one of the biggest publications in Australia, think it's really good value. That's based on the fact that it's bigger than the MG ZS EV. It's a one full size up, has better range, and costs less money. It's really a no-brainer. If you're going to buy the MG ZS EV, I would recommend don't do that. Put in a pre-order for this vehicle because realistically, if you look at the specifications, it's just a better vehicle for the money. It doesn't make sense to buy the smaller MG ZS EV. Unless you don't want to wait. If you don't want to wait, well, that's different. The price is pretty good as well when you consider the standard equipment. Comes standard with the sunroof, the 13-inch digital infotainment display, leather-like seating materials, electric adjustment for both front seats, the wireless phone charger, and an electric tailgate. So it's pretty well spec'd for the price. None of that you have to pay extra for. Now, one flaw that I think it does have. You don't have the same 100 kilowatt charging of some competitors. 80 kilowatt, it's decent, but compared to a Tesla, it's not very good. That's the truth. The charging speed, hey, I'm buying one. I'm being honest here. 80 kilowatt, not good enough in my view. It should be at least a minimum of 200, but that's just me. Let me know what you think about that in the comment section below. Would that be a deal breaker for you, or would you just deal with that? And the reality is, I mean, if you're charging at home, say 99% of the time, it doesn't matter at all. But if you're doing road trips, I do a few road trips, as you guys know. I have kids that I take to BMX races all over Australia. So that is something that will definitely mean I'll be waiting a little bit longer when I charge the car. What about the driving experience? The first challenge in doing the review, said the journalist, was getting his head around left-hand driving. Takes some getting used to. And I did that as well when I traveled to America, when I traveled to Europe. I found it a bit weird driving on the other side of the road and also driving on the other side of the car. Suspension. It uses a McPherson struts up front and a multi-link setup at the rear. It's tuned for soft, wafting comfort. A lot like the way that American cars are tuned for American consumers. So in America, you'll probably love it. Now for rougher, more potholed and corrugated roads, the body bounced a little and jiggled around a bit, suggesting that more damping control could be good. They also noticed when loaded with 5 adults and a bootload of camera gear, the lack of damping became more obvious. Steering. It's fully electric, of course, and it's tuned light for easy control. It's not exactly full of feel and feedback like some might want from a driver's car, but the tune is fast to respond to steering inputs. Once again, it's easy to live with and suits the modus operandi of the Atto 3. Performance, 150 kilowatt and 310 newton meters. I think that's plenty of power. Any more than that, you're probably just going to be using the battery out more than you need to be. Apparently the motor is very silent and surprisingly quick. Heavy throttle takeoffs clearly ask too much of the crappy tires that they put on it. I think, based on what I'm hearing about the tires, they should change these tires before they sell the car. Traction control was quick to respond when the tires lost grip, but if you kept accelerating, the problem simply jumped from wheel to wheel. BYD claims the 0 to 100 time will take around 7 seconds, which is not too bad. Now, the reviewer said they also drove the vehicle through a heavy rain downpouring in Australia, and they noticed the tires were skittish around corners. Rolling acceleration was more elegant and effective, and it left the journalist pondering how much improvement could be gained from a different set of tires. There's a chance you might lose some efficiency if you got better tires, but it could be worth it for the improved driving characteristics. And I think that's something that I will do when I get delivery of this car. If it does come with these, what sounds like pretty povo cheap tires, I'll replace those pretty quickly. Conclusion. First impressions of the Atto 3 from this journalist were quite positive. Build quality seems to be good, and it's got a high standard of safety level standard. And it's got a high level of safety technology that comes standard. Both right and left-hand drive vehicles come from the same factory in Shenzhen in China. Australian delivered right-hand drive models will come off their own production line. And the interior of the Atto 3 is, well, unusual, but it has a good mix of space and practicality for everyday usage, they said. One thing they weren't able to get a grasp on was the true driving range of the Atto 3. And that's something that I'll test for you when I get it. When I get it, I'll drive it until the battery hits 0, literally 0. I'm going to drive it, and wherever it stops is where it stops. I'm just going to have someone help me to maybe provide some sort of portable charger experience. If any of you live in Melbourne and you're happy to come with me, then great. We'll test drive the vehicle. We'll see what it gets to, and you can be on the channel. One thing that's going to be interesting to see is how BYD goes in Australia. It's a new brand. Most people don't know about it, but I think it's going to catch on really quickly. The outside of this car is one of the things that strikes me the most. The outside looks great, right? The outside looks great. It's got a really good battery pack. We know that they're good quality battery packs. We know that, hundreds of thousands of drivers in China are using them now and saying good things about them. We know that they're LFP batteries, and we know that they're probably going to give you about 1 million miles of usage before you start to see any serious degradation. So that's one of the great things about this car. Finally, this is what the journalist said. Provided the BYD can keep the build quality as good as this test car and the driving range checks out, then this well-proportioned electric car will be a great option for many buyers. Now, I'm going to put a link in the description below to the original article, and you can read it if you want. But I would suggest don't go to the comments because they are embarrassing and an indictment on to be honest, frankly, the stupidity of many Australians. Unfortunately, there's a lot of Australians here who are very scared of change. They're scared of an electric future. And so they just want to bash it and criticize it. So just don't even bother. Don't waste your time in the comment section below. But if you want to check out the original article, I'll put a link in the description. And as you know, as soon as I get the car, I'll be testing it. I'll be updating you guys regularly. I'll tell you my true, honest feelings on the car. If it's trash, if it's great. I'll drive it hard, I'll drive it slow, I'll drive it fast. I'll test the 0 to 60 mile per hour time. I'll see what the top speed is. It's going to be very interesting, and I'm excited to share it with you guys, tell you my experience, and give you a true verdict, not a journalist verdict, because by the way, journalists, yeah, they all do get paid to some degree by these car manufacturers. So they do have to not be too critical because otherwise, you can't bite the hand that feeds you. But none of them feed me. Guess what? No automotive journalist pays me a single cent. So I can tell you the honest truth.